What other skills then do you think you'd have developed once you were in your 20s and 30s in terms of that leadership capability? What was it that was enabling you to be successful in that way, apart from the things you've shared so far?
Ended up working in retail for a period, and I would describe it almost fell into finance, fell into banking by accident. But I think what I take from that period is, and it was a difficult period.
What I found in my experience, not with everybody, but people that have grown up feeling entrepreneurial or indeed intrapreneurs, which it sounds as though you are. When we look at the change piece, sometimes it's easy to identify what it is we need to change, particularly if we've got a coach or a mentor, but when they're not around, some entrepreneurs find that quite difficult to ask for help around that change, and we try to sort of muddle up and do it ourselves.
Once you start to realise that, you can perhaps catch yourself doing it and kind of go, okay, lean back, take a breath, and that physical thing in itself calms you down because you're taking ownership of the energy and emotion. So I think it's self-awareness. Again, back to my personal experience, you might not know where it is, but taking a step and trying something or doing something different or trying a different career or kind of making a step in that direction is itself really important.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Richard Bearman has joined us in the studio today. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Good to see you today. We always start the show, the audience will know, we're just getting to know our guests a little bit better. So just tell us a bit more about yourself professionally and personally.
I work in finance, work for the British Business Bank, and I've worked there for the last 5 years, and previous to that worked at HSBC. So sort of 25 or so years in banking, predominantly in commercial banking or business banking, so supporting businesses, small businesses, medium-sized businesses. At the moment, sort of I'm the managing director for small business lending, so looking after and supporting small businesses across the UK. British Business Bank is the government's economic development bank, so we're sort of different to a normal sort of financial services or a bank in that our role is really to support SMEs where there's maybe a gap in the market or the market's not quite working effectively. So really trying to do things that perhaps the mainstream or the challenger banks or the broad financial services community is not doing. So it's good fun and something we're quite proud of because we tend to do things that otherwise wouldn't happen. So we have a lot of good stories. So that's what I do professionally. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Personally, married, the obvious stuff, 2 kids, 2 boys, two starting to become late teen boys. So 2 boys, sort of one currently doing his last GCSEs today, and the other one sort of just started his A-levels. I guess the personal life is, like a lot of parents, revolves a lot around them. A lot of rugby in my life, in the sense that I coach rugby and I'm a referee of rugby. So that sort of takes a lot of my energies. And beyond that, I think just enjoying myself and having as a stress-free life as possible is probably my personal life ambition.
We can all strive for that. And I'm interested in the rugby. So in terms of the 3 aspects there of playing, coaching and refereeing, which have you enjoyed doing most?
The playing days are well behind me, hence probably the other 2. Actually, I like the refereeing. Actually, I do like the refereeing, partly because it is done through my boys. So I'm a sort of enthusiastic parent coach rather than a professional coach, probably the right way of putting it. But in a weird way, I find it less stressful reffing than I do watching, particularly when I'm watching a team that I coach. So, I actually bizarrely quite enjoy the refereeing.
Yeah, there's a bit more respect, isn't there, for rugby referees than there is for football in particular. So,
there is, and I think there's a sort of,
I see that on the pitch.
there is more respect, and I'm not going to make too much of it, but it's an interesting sort of psychological experience refereeing, kids at different age groups, and just seeing how they react in different situations, and it keeps you on your toes mentally. And it's a complicated game with a lot of rule sets, and you're never going to get them all right. And kind of, it's an interesting challenge. But like all things, when you walk off knowing, you walk off something and think, okay, I did that well, I handled that well, that was a sort of a good game. And there's other times you walk away and you think, crikey, yeah, that wasn't great. I sort of, whatever happened. But it's a challenge, so I do quite like it.
Excellent. Well, let's keep with the link of children. I have children as well. Last day of GCSE today for my daughter, so I'm with you on that one, and the relief that's going to be in the household this evening. But what about your childhood? Take us back to your experiences when you were younger that, on reflection, shaped your early drive, leadership style, that early success that you had in your career.
So it was like a long time ago. But so you're very happy, sort of like you just probably described as traditional kind of normal upbringing, I guess, is probably a way of putting it. I think probably things that shaped me, if I look back on it, is my dad runs his own business, still runs his own business, but ran his own business. A classic sort of very much a sort of entrepreneur, trader type business, trading business. I think with the ups and downs that comes with that, good years, bad years, and seeing the sort of the cycle of business, I think that sort of led. I had no intention of going into finance when I would never have thought I would work in banking at the time, but the part of banking that I've ended up in, which is supporting SMEs, I think growing up in an environment with your dad that's running a business, I think that's played a big part in the direction of travel. And I think gives a degree of empathy as well, understanding the sort of all the pros and cons of being a business person. And I think also that kind of created a bit of an entrepreneur. I still think I'm a kind of frustrated entrepreneur. I still think that one day I'm going to kind of have the confidence and bravery to actually go and start my own business. But when I was young, I wasn't, I guess you'd say was an entrepreneur. So I had my own, I didn't call it a business at the time, but from about 15, I had a painting and decorating business. So I would started off with family and then started going around where I lived and knocking on doors and saying, do you need anything doing? And would spend most summers, particularly summers, painting, houses and, doing the woodwork and, simple. I wouldn't say I was hugely skillful, but, was looking back on it, was running a business. And then, university sort of, there sort of effectively was running a business there as well. So I think sort of grew up in a kind of that entrepreneurial sort of environment. And part of that is the sort of working out the self-confidence to go and ask for the business or just go and knock on a door and say, do you need something doing? So I think that was probably quite informative for me when I was a child. I think the other sort of part of it is someone the other day sort of said, what's your purpose? What's your purpose at work? What's your professional purpose? Something like that. And I always feel sort of slightly cheesy or perhaps even sort of slightly naive when I say my purpose is happiness. And that doesn't come from some childhood lack of happiness. But I think growing up it sounds so obvious, but that's really important to me. And so therefore that's something, and maybe we'll come on to, that's something that comes through to my work, that my purpose of work is for those around me, by and large, to be happy, for me to by and large be happy, and the people I work with to be happy. And when it's such a simple thing to say, but actually you have to think about quite a lot professionally how you make that happen. So maybe we'll talk about that, but I think that comes from having a broadly happy childhood, but then also having some really good close friends, and the realization through life that's really important. And other things may well go well, may go badly, and we have ups and downs. But that pure thought of wanting to be happy, I think, is quite important, and I think that probably came from childhood.
And if we think about then what else you got from that kind of early system, so feeling safe, feeling happy, seeing an entrepreneurial father around you would actually encourage you that you could do that. So that entrepreneurial gene linked with this need or want, purpose to be happy. What other skills then do you think you'd have developed once you were in your 20s and 30s in terms of that leadership capability? What was it that was enabling you to be successful in that way, apart from the things you've shared so far?
This is difficult. It's sort of so I was not a particularly academic child or person. I still don't think I'm particularly academic. I'm very inquisitive. I sort of read a lot, I listen to podcasts. I'm inquisitive, but I've never classed myself as academic. Just sort of did okay. It was probably, would be my report card, all right. Could do better, that kind of thing. And definitely didn't leave. I did go to university, and left university, and didn't have a particular kind of any sense of where I was going, and spent 5 or 6 years in my early 20s. I do remember at times being called, it was being mentioned, it was drifting, but going from things to different things. So doing different things, periods of unemployment, lots of work as a contractor, just to sort of find something to do. I was lucky, one of my fortunate things is my now wife, we met at university, far clever and more successful and more, just in many ways, particularly I sort of, lucky on my part to be able to partner up with someone that did know what they were doing and where they were going and what they wanted to get up to. So I had that piece of fortune, but I tried teaching. I spent the best part of a year in America working in a coal mine for a coal mining company randomly. Came back, was unemployed for quite a prolonged period. Ended up working in retail for a period. And I would describe it almost fell into finance, fell into banking by accident. But I think what I take from that period is, and it was a difficult period. So there was, there were some quite low moments of thinking, "Crikey, what am I doing? What's where am I going in life?" That kind of thing. So I've had those moments of not being happy. But I think what that period and that early period sort of did is a few things for me. Is I look back and I think, there's lots of paths through life and paths to leadership. And a lot of people have a route that sort of follows a route from school to university to whatever role it might be into leadership. But I take real value in that breadth of experience. And even though it was a long time ago now, all those different things that I did along the way, I think have added to my kind of character and my set of stories and my set of experiences, which I think give in leadership. And then as my career did start to develop, give me something to fall back on. So, as an example, I quite enjoy public speaking. I quite enjoy being on a stage or talking at events or doing that kind of thing. Still get very nervous about it, but never as nervous as I was as a 22-year-old standing up in front of a group of 13-year-old kids, sort of trying to teach drama to them. And actually that year, I learned that I wasn't going to be a teacher. I learned that teaching wasn't for me. Enjoyed it for the most part, but I definitely got something about how to stand there and talk to people and to engage people, and through to the periods of I'd say the periods of unemployment, sort of very sort of low pay contractor work, working in factories. It's kind of a realization of how lucky I am. And I remember in my early time in banking thinking, "Crikey, how lucky am I that I've got this?" And it gives you a sense of gratitude for it. And so all these different things that I did at the time, not easy. At the time, had moments of sort of doubt and everything else, but definitely looking back, give me a real breadth of experience. And I think when I kind of do get asked to talk to younger people about their careers, and it's not to sort of dismiss specialism and sort of knowing what you want to do and following a path and becoming expert, absolutely. But I think some of the best leaders are able to lean on lots of different experiences in their life, either within one organisation or multiple organisations or multiple different careers, and build a blend of experiences that you can lean on. And if nothing else, it gives you interesting stories to tell. And I think, again, part of the story leadership is having stories. So, to randomly pull out a story relating to working in a coal mine in Arkansas, it gives you something interesting to talk about as well, and gives some interesting stories that perhaps sometimes you can either break difficult situations with or perhaps helpfully move things on. I think the other thing from my early experience is, which I think it's become known as by some people as the imposter syndrome. I think that seems to be talked about quite a lot. I think it might have gone out of fashion a little bit, but whether it's that or something else, even now I'm looking at a screen here that says Confessions of a Successful Leader, and my imposter syndrome is firing loudly saying, no, you're not, no, you're not, no, you're not. But I think in that early period, there's definitely that sense of self-doubt and sort of crikey, you're not good enough kind of thing firing off. And I think in my early time, when I did first join HSBC, it was really firing. It was a real sense of, what are you doing? You don't know anything about finance. You don't know anything about banking. You don't know anything about, what on earth are you doing? You're going to get found out. I think one of my sort of early lessons is it was always to use that to an advantage, to kind of think, okay, well, no, you're not that person. You're not that traditional route. You're not that kind of person. So what are you different? What is it about you that makes you different? And now I went back to, well, I've got a load of experiences none of these people have got. So let's make the best of it. Let's sort of turn the fact that you're not, in my head, I didn't fit in with the rest of the people that were sort of had a very big financial background in my mind, were very academic and very sort of impressive in their knowledge of finance and everything. Yeah. Do you know what? I can be creative. I can be innovative. I can talk in a different way. I've had different experiences. I've done these things and sort of try and turn the sort of things that are firing off, saying you're not good enough, into your super strength. So they'll probably be my bit of a ramble, but they'll be my probably the key things I look back on as being quite points of difference that I learned in my 20s.
And I love what you've shared there, because again, in my experience of working with many leaders, I think you're right. If a leader trusts the fact that they have resources to draw upon from their experiences to date, whatever they are, whether they're varied or narrow, and they have the wherewithal to say, well, actually, that's enough. I'm already enough to be able to lead people in this situation by drawing upon that, rather than the self-doubt, creeping in. And of course it does when we're tired and when we're feeling negative. But I'm really interested in how we link this theme and this pattern about your particular purpose around this happiness. And I'm curious about what's it like to be around you as a leader when you're creating that and that purpose is being fulfilled, and also what's it like when it isn't. I'm really interested about that.
What's it like to be around me? Well, I think it's, with that, not being too spiritual about it, but it's about the way you get your energy from. So I think when it's where there's certain things where I know I get that positive energy from, where I'm kind of at my best, when the innovation or the creativity or the sort of the ability to sort of hopefully positively influence people around you. There's a sort of a vibe, there's a sense, where you are with that. And when I'm not at my best is where I'm being drawn into tasks or activities that are suppressing that energy. And so I think, there's no doubt that, I think like all people, but when I'm not on my best, I'm probably not, it's that sort of snappiness and the shortness and the kind of the not giving myself to the task or the issue, whatever it might be, and closing down. And, I'm lucky I work with some very intuitive people, and I'm fortunate that some of the people that work closest with me in my team, I think partly because I do think I'm quite open and I'm quite sort of try and sort of be because the nature is to sort of try and be open and break down and sort of try and talk about things with people as much as possible. I think therefore they hopefully understand me a little bit better, and sometimes probably understanding me better than myself. So I'm lucky that I have people around me now that will call me out and say, hey, is everything all right? You're off kilter today, or actually, is there an issue? And I think that's really important as a leader, have people around you that know you well enough that can be part of your support network. So I think when I'm not at my best, it's, I no doubt shut down a little bit, don't step into things, become a bit more detail focused and probably a little bit snappy and gripey. I think when I'm at my best, it's creating environments where people can be at their best, where people succeed, where the people in the team are themselves. Work is never 100% a great big joyful never-ending stream of happiness, but where people by and large that are working close with you are enjoying what they do and actually are themselves happy in whatever way that means. And I think there's a sort of people talk about flow, they talk about vibe, they talk about sort of, but that's when I'm at my best, being in the middle of an environment where people are happy doing what they're doing, being productive, being innovative, being creative, pushing the boundaries. And that's a really sort of, to my mind, almost joyful place to be.
And it's interesting you said it's not necessarily spiritual, but it's about the energy. And I agree with you. There's lots more organizations now that are starting to study, understand energy within self and how we actually move into that and then play to it, but also energy between individuals and relationships. So let's just build on that theme a little bit, because you're obviously conversant with this. So how do you regulate your own energy? It's so important, as you've said there, to try and maintain that positive energy as much as possible. What kind of day-to-day strategy do you have to do that?
But I think there's probably nothing that not been heard many times, but the key is knowing yourself. And you're never, I wouldn't say anyone's ever at the end of that journey, but it's having the sort of the self-awareness to catch yourself when there's things that you're doing that are creating that positive energy, and catch yourself when there's things that aren't. I've had lots of great mentors and advisors and coaches along the way that have tried to sort of help this, and definitely have not cracked, and I don't think you ever do, sort of infinite journey, but the sort of things that work for me, so something that's quite structured and quite organized, which some might say is not me, but I do a thing called a win, learn, change diary every week. I've done it, and it came from a course I did years and years ago, and it's just on a Friday, close the week off and just note down the one thing the one win this week, the one thing that went well, the one thing I've learned this week, and one thing I'm going to change and try and change or do differently. And that gives me a positive energy in many ways, because on the bad weeks, and we do have bad weeks, sometimes it's difficult to find the win, but it forces you to kind of go, okay, despite all that, something's gone well this week. What is it? What's gone well this week? And on the good weeks, it's like, okay, it's a privilege to write down the thing that went really well this week. And again, it sounds obvious, but what have I learned this week? What thing can I take from the week that I've learned? And sometimes, and I've done this for a long time now, and you look back, and sometimes you find things you think, crikey, is that all I learned this week? It's pathetic, but it's that. But sometimes there's real, I'd say, massive pieces of insight that I kind of go, yeah, that was brilliant. That's something that I've leaned on forever, and it's quite depressing the number of times I've decided I'm going to change the same thing over the years, but at least having the attitude to want to change and improve and do things better. So I think that's something that helps me manage my energy. But the other side is more sort of intuitive, of understanding. Something someone told me was about when I'm not at my best, if I'm getting into a challenging situation where the sort of you can feel for me, it's sort of sometimes the anger starting to come out, starting to get cross, you're having a conversation, or you're in a situation or a meeting where you sort of feel yourself, and you can kind of get into that conflict type situation where it's not that you're wrong to disagree with someone, but the way you're responding to it isn't constructive, and it's sort of making the conflict worse, whatever it might be. They talked about next time it happens, try and make the mental note to notice what you're feeling and what you're doing. And so that was a sort of a little thing around the sort of more negative energies, noticing how you react, what your body's doing when you're in that sort of destructive mindset or destructive response. And I think that's, again, I would say I've mastered it in any way, but that self-awareness makes a big difference. And then you can start thinking, okay, so for me, it's leaning into the situation. There's a physical thing going on here that's part, for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm sure there's psychology there, but there's something going on when I can feel my blood pressure going, I'm getting angry, I'm getting annoyed, I start physically leaning in across the table or leaning in. So it's sort of, once you start to realize that, you can perhaps catch yourself doing it and kind of go, okay, lean back, take a breath. And that physical thing in itself calms you down, because you're taking ownership of the energy and the emotion. So I think it's self-awareness, and over the years, sort of spotting the little things that positively influence or don't. And on the positive side, again, it is, I think, an obvious point, but it's knowing what things are that gives you the positive energy, and make sure you physically book them into your diary. It's sort of looking ahead, and there are things that I know I enjoy doing, I think I'm good at, but even if I'm not good at, the fact that I enjoy it and I get positive energy means that can sustain me through the next few days of things that possibly don't give you the positive energy. But it's knowing what they are and not dismissing them. And I think an observation I would make that a lot of the time, the things that we enjoy at work, or at least the things I enjoy at work, maybe not others, quite often the things we enjoy at work and that we find relatively easy and we get positive energy out, sometimes we almost dismiss them as because they're easy, we get just somehow that's not work because I enjoy that. So somehow they get, I'm doing too much of that because that's not, and you almost dismiss it. So I think it's important to recognize it, give it its due, not dismiss it, and make sure you're doing it not as much as you can. Make sure you're doing it enough to sustain you through the other stuff that perhaps you don't enjoy or get positive energy from.
And I love the tip that you. Yeah, no, it does. I love the tip that you gave there about the win, learn, change, and what I found in my experience, not with everybody, but people that have grown up feeling entrepreneurial or indeed intrapreneurs, which it sounds as though you are in the organisation at the moment, budding into an entrepreneur. When we look at the change piece, sometimes it's easy to identify what it is we need to change, particularly if we've got a coach or a mentor. But when they're not around, some entrepreneurs find that quite difficult to ask for help around that change, and we try to sort of muddle on and do it ourselves. So what's your experience been of that? What have you found challenging around asking for support around the change you want to see in yourself?
I think it's one of the advantages. If I go back to the early sort of the question about the early years, so that imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it, that sort of nagging doubt you're not good enough, and the sense that you don't have a traditional sort of background. So I've fostered that. I've kind of encouraged it almost, because what it causes that ability, I believe I have, of saying, I don't know, I have no idea. Can you help? I think times have probably moved in my favour. So 25 years ago, possibly a leadership that was seen as a weakness. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there was a bit more sort of machismo. And I say machismo in the knowledge that sort of male set, a masculinity and a machismo of kind of almost, you don't admit you're wrong. It's that sort of strong, brave, aggressive, almost aggressive type leadership was generally seen as, again, it might be wrong, but that would be my experience. So that showing a degree of sort of almost humility about I don't know was sometimes in degrees. I think sort of culture has moved in my direction around this, so it's probably more accepted. But I think I've kind of cultivated that, because I think with the people that you work with, and it seems to have borne out that while perhaps sometimes people upward wouldn't necessarily appreciate that, and I do remember getting the feedback that you're very lightweight. I remember being told you're very lightweight. You're asking for help too much. And I remember that coming from someone very senior, and on the one hand, I was a bit, I was like, oh, blimey, maybe that, but the other part, I kind of sort of thought, to hell with you. I don't buy it. I don't buy that, and I could see the sort of the positive results or the positive impact of creating a team, working with a team at the time. And I can remember we had a very good team. We had a really good team. Things were working. Things were, we were in a good space professionally. So I think that sort of early lesson of being able to ask for help and sort of say, I don't know the answer to that, but let's find out, or who knows, let's see what we can do. And sort of that gives you the ability to ask for help. And then when you're talking about personal development, to be able to say, this is something I'm working on. Can you help me with it? Or do you have any ideas and that sort of thing? And I think the other side of, just sort of slightly off topic, which I think is another, important point around it, is I do enjoy almost deliberately not doing it the way it's done before. I sort of enjoy that slight kind of iconoclastic kind of approach about sort of, and that's dangerous, because it does mean that you have to sort of, sometimes it actually works really, really well. So don't change it. So you have to have a kind of a break on it. But I think, again, that sort of mindset of, I don't know, let's see, allows you to try things differently and allows you to do things differently and lock into the creativity that either you have or people around you have. Whereas if I've always got all the answers, we're never going to, the risk is we don't actually change very much, or definitely the risk is that we only ever do it one way.
Sure. Just moving on to building on what we've heard from you so far about our audience and what might be resonating for them, what advice would you give to the people out there who understand your story, can relate to it and say, well, what's really important to me is this, and it's not about money necessarily, it's not about driving to be this, it's about something that's important to them either spiritually or a purpose which is around happiness or whatever it is for them. And maybe they're sitting there thinking, there's definitely more for me out there, there's something out there, but I don't know what it is. What advice would you give to those people in terms of acting on that?
So I think I get advice. It's always difficult to think through advice. So I think go back a little bit to what I was saying earlier, that if you don't know what it is or necessarily where you want to get to or what sort of the answer, I think firstly, almost, and no one does, or very few people do. I think kind of the majority are kind of, going to use again, there's a lot of, the journey, but everyone's on the journey, and actually, and again, it's cliche, but most cliches, there's an element of truth in the journey is the fun bit. There is, it's almost like there isn't a sort of an end game, and I think, so having the aspiration, I want to do this, I want to be that, have that job or have that, great, but if it's sort of ethereal like happiness, you're never, it's like you're never going to, I am now happy forever. Of course, you're never going to get it. It's sort of like an ongoing thing. Or if it's sort of, I want to do this job or be that person or, I don't know, get that amount of money, whatever it is, I guarantee when you've got it, that's not the end of the journey. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Now I want to go on here. So there's nothing wrong. And in fact, something very powerful about not knowing the end game or not knowing necessarily the answer. But then also, again, back to my personal experience, okay, well, you might not know where it is, but taking a step and trying something or doing something different or trying a different career or kind of making a step in that direction is itself really important. So you might not know what the end goal is, but building up a kind of a tapestry of experiences will probably help you work out what the end goal is. And frankly, wherever you end up, give you more chance of success. So if you bring it down to individual, if someone is, to my mind, not happy in a job, as not a very easy thing to say, not always an easy thing to do. But if you're fundamentally not happy and more often than not enjoying your job, it sounds really crass, but do something else, change, do something else, try something else, and the something else might not be the answer, but I think it is something that unfortunately do see that, and partly sometimes it's circumstance and it's difficult to change, but a lot of people will spend their time doing something they don't really enjoy, and I think it's sad. That's sad, and that's not a question of seniority. I think I've seen plenty of people in senior roles, then you kind of go, they don't like what they do, but for whatever reason, it might be inertia, it might be lack of purpose, it might be sort of financial, for whatever reason, they're stuck doing something they don't enjoy. So I think my advice would be is, if you're in that position, you don't know where you're heading or what you're doing or what the end goal is, or you do know what it is, but you're a long way from it, I think taking those steps in whatever way to build up the experience to get there and to build up the tapestry of experiences, I think is important.
I would agree with that, and I think there's an important point to add that usually people who are moving that direction and make that change, the most important step is making the decision, deciding that I'm going to change. It's really hard to do that, and I think that can be made easier sometimes, as you said, by having that group of friends, associates, colleagues who support us in that sense and probably know we're not very happy or we feel a bit stuck, and would encourage and support us in making that decision and be there for us as we go on that first step of the journey. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to finish with one last question, Rich. I'm really interested to hear the answer to this, bearing in mind where we've gone. When we didn't script this, we didn't know where it was going to go, but I'm really coming back to this purpose that you have in life, which I'm really, really interested in. So if you now fast forward for the remaining elements of your life in terms of your professional life in particular, how is this going to manifest for you in terms of this where you want to be and this purpose that drives you, linking with your upbringing around entrepreneurial background as well and serving SMEs right now? What are you going to be doing in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I think I'm privileged to be, at a level of seniority to be able to influence things that are kind of on at a degree of scale, because we deal with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of businesses. And I think sort of the next, whether it's final, but the next sort of, say, 5 to 10 years, I think what I'm looking forward to is I have a sort of a slightly, again, cheesy phrase. So I've always said, well, we're doing small business, whether at HSBC or where I do now, what do? We facilitate people's dreams. So when people start a business, in businesses, when people are running a business, particularly early stage businesses, yes, they need money, they need this, they need support, they need this and accounts and all that sort of stuff. But really at the heart of it, there's a dream. There's sort of like, and the dreams are really vary from, I want to be the next, the next sort of billionaire that sort of runs off into the sunset, or my dream is I just want a bit more money coming into my household to be able to sort of make things a little bit easier. So there's a full range of it, but there's a dream at the heart of it. And so whether it was a different organisation, wherever you work, to be part of that is really quite powerful. And that sense that you played a part in helping somebody, and you're just giving them the petrol that goes in the car. The money is just the petrol that helps the car go. It's not the car, it's not the destination, etc., etc. But without the petrol, it doesn't go anywhere. And so I believe that what I do and what my colleagues do and my team do, we play a really important part. So for the next 5 or 10 years, it's really to enjoy maximising that, having this bigger impact, and continuing on that sort of journey with my team and teams to take as much pleasure out of that, and to realise and to get our heads up. And I think that's one of the things that definitely where I am at, where we my team, we need to work on as much as possible. It's we can get drawn into the practical realities of what we're doing day in, day out, but actually get our heads up and kind of go, wow, what an amazing thing to be part of, to help someone launch a business, start a business, grow a business, and so on and so forth. So a bit sort of broad brush, but I think, I feel privileged enough to be in a position to sort of scale that and to do more of that, and to ultimately help a lot more people with their ambitions and dreams and what they want to do with their business, and for those around me to take a huge amount of pleasure out of that and enjoy it, and to focus on it and to do the best we can to support those people.
Well, Richard, thank you for sharing everything you've shared today in terms of your journey and what's been important to you and the advice that you've been given. I know that many in our audience will relate to your story and taken some things away for them about how they lead themselves towards their dreams, whether that's now or in the future, and also how they might lead others differently as well. So once again, Richard, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favourite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.